Thank you for a very interesting debate. Many reasons. This debate was there were quite a lot of close calls in this debate for reasons that we're going to explain. We eventually reached a consensus decision, and all of this will be explained. At the end of the day, we gave the first to closing government, the second to opening government, yes, that is you, the third to opening opposition, and the fourth, unfortunately, to closing opposition. We're going to talk about where there were a lot of close calls and why you guys would make this as easy as you could have for us. But I'm going to do it just in the order of people that spoke. So opening government get up and they give us the following main things. They tell us life is better. How do I want this? There's a lot of back and forth on like what exactly the potential options for the different state solutions are. Ultimately, while some of the things are mitigatory to a lot of the points on the other side, they largely stand under a lot of the different cases that exist on the table. So I'm going to try and address as many of them as possible, but recognize that largely it can affect a massive amount of the things that happen. So what do we get from opening government, right? Basically, what we get from opening government is the idea that in a two-state solution, they're likely to still be mistreated because when they have to cross the borders, that's like some kind of problem. And then they tell us that in a one-state solution, they get a lot of things that they otherwise don't get. They tell us that they get more access to jobs, more access to education, the right of return that they have on their side, and in second speech expanded on much more, the notion that it's much more likely for them to have access to like some kind of democratic power, which they're not particularly likely to have under their own Palestinian government for reasons that are explained and analyzed that we're going to get to. Opening opposition answered this by saying the following things. So they minimize a lot the extent to which these people are going to have full autonomy and control under a one-state solution, telling me that there's likely to still be racism and all kinds of things like that, limitations on their ability to access political power that are structurally already there and are likely to continue in the future, and all kinds of things like that. And then they tell me that they are more, that their ability to have an independent state that is their own is more important to these people than their ability to get access to jobs and other things along those lines. They also try and give me a point that talks to me about why they are more likely to be able to have democracy tomorrow because the second they have like a flourishing economy and stuff like that, then they'll be able to. I'm not having fun with the ballot, so excuse me 1 second. Just want to make sure that. Okay. Yes. Once they have access to a flourishing economy, then they can turn to becoming democratic and stuff like that. Why do we think this ultimately falls to what we get from the government? So, 2 reasons. One is because while we accept to some extent that there are a number of people to whom it is more important to have their own autonomous state than to have access to jobs and clean water and stuff like that, the fact that there exist these people, it is not clear to me necessarily where the numbers lie, and we're not necessarily sure why we should believe opening opposition that the majority of Palestinians have a preference to autonomy over having access to all the things that the benefits that they claim that they get. We don't have a lot of direct rebuttal to those benefits except to say, oh, they won't get as many of them as they might do in a completely like free and democratic country because there'll still be racism and they won't have a lot of just because they're in the periphery and stuff like that. But to what extent I don't get those things and why that's not still more important to people, I'm not 100% sure. Secondly, because we don't think that the statement that says the second there's a middle class is definitely democracy actually engages with the analysis that we got from them on why it is that it's incredibly unlikely that there will be a flourishing democracy in a Palestinian state that's founded. And given that, if the class you're trying to win on is autonomy and my ability to like make choices for myself and stuff like that, in that situation, while I believe that I have potentially more of that under a Palestinian state, it's not that I gain that fully and gain the full ability to self-autonomy and stuff like that I would otherwise get. And in that situation, given those weighings, I'm unclear as to why the majority of people fall under your side as opposed to their side in terms of being likely to be happier and better off. And I'm not sure why it should necessarily be this way. And that is how we ended up giving it to the opening government over opening opposition. Let's bring second government in. And let's tell you what we don't accept real quick. The question of viability is not a question in this debate. It's literally in the motion.
So you made your lives real hard there, deeply unnecessarily. Let's talk about what we do. Beyond that, the reason that it was potentially harder. What is happening there? Have each other's back. It's all good. Okay. We get a lot of things that we hear from closing governments. You also, in many ways, make it harder for us to necessarily give you the first by not differentiating everything that you've done from things that we've got from opening government. What we do get very clearly is several things. One is a much more significant explanation on why it is that it's very difficult for any kind of, no matter what kind of two-state solution we have that is likely to potentially exist, to have, be able to flourish as an economy, to have access to resources that they need and things like that. We get, as opposed to from opening government also, that give us just if they have to cross the border, there's still going to be skirmishes with the Israelis, a much better explanation about the kind of likelihood that it might deteriorate into kinds of wars, and the likelihood that why that's much more likely to happen in a two-state solution, why it can't happen in a one-state solution, or it's much harder to because of the level of integration that the people are going to have inside these countries and stuff like that. And given those things, we think that we have and also when we take from the viability, it's not the viability that it will exist in the first place, but the viability of it, as we said, to flourish in the long term and to be able to access that's something that we could take and could accept. And we think that we have much better analysis on why they can't gain all the positives that opening government are trying to talk about under a two-state solution, why they're much more likely to gain them even under an imperfect one-state solution, as well as some more responses that we get to the notion of religious autonomy and stuff like that, about maybe weighing it against the importance of having access to all the religious sites that I have and all those things, which I don't know which of those things is more important I'm not inside any of these people's brains, and therefore some more responsibility for that. We think that we can weigh all of those things above what we get from open government in terms of being more significant explanations and better explanations as to why we get all the positive things that open government will talk about. But I will say you definitely can make our life easy in terms of doing that, and that is shame on you. Okay, let's talk about closing opposition. Here's what we get from closing opposition. Closing opposition give us two main cases. One, they talk about religion, and two, they talk why religious autonomy is critically important to these people, and two, why it is that it's more likely to get democracy. So the first one about religion, we felt that the analysis there was literally the same thing that we'd already gotten from opening opposition, except instead of saying what they care about is their identity and the right to statehood, you replaced that with religion and then gave me exactly the same analysis. It's very difficult for us to credit that as a significant extension beyond things that we've already heard, and given that they also already at some point said the word religion, it's very difficult for me to explain why that is a significant extension. The other thing that we get from you is this point about democracy, and that's a different explanation of democracy that we've gotten from opening opposition. Opening opposition tell me flourishing middle class, blah, blah, blah. You tell me it's easier for them to have a democracy because there's no bogeyman, and therefore it's easy, I don't get to throw blame on other people. That's a different explanation than we got from opening opposition. However, it's not a good explanation that's weighed as to why it's a better explanation than just the middle class and therefore ability to think about these things than we already get from opening opposition, which makes it harder for us. The first one we can't credit at all, the second one we can credit as an extension, but it's not clear why it's more important than the things that we've already gotten from opening opposition on those issues. And we felt that when it came to direct rebuttal to the other teams that could help credit you, we felt that there was a lot of, there was just a significant lack of responsiveness to the explanations as to why it is that these people are unlikely to be able to have jobs in others, jobs and access to clean water and stuff like that we haven't already gotten from the opening opposition, which is basically all about trying to explain which is the more likely two-state solution to happen. I don't think anyone clearly wins that clash, but certainly there's not significant additional rebuttals that we get from you guys, and in that situation it's very hard for us to credit you above them. Are we clear on the rationale? Okay, that's excellent. Let's do a moment of feedback. So, OG, here's the most important thing that you need to know. This is a This House Believes debate, and 100% one of the clashes that should exist in the debate is what are the likely options for a two-state or one-state solution to exist, right? Which one of them is more, not which one of them is more likely to exist, but given those options, what is the most likely one-state solution option, and what is the most likely two-state solution option? You cannot fiat the things that you guys feared, which is why we could definitely accept the rebuttals that we got from opening up that minimize the extent of the utopia that you're trying to build about how they're going to have 100% free rights and there's maybe they won't even be a jurist state anymore and things along those lines, right? You don't get to fear that. What you want to do is analyze, which is what we get a lot more from closing government, why it's likely that the government will allow for rights to happen, why it's more difficult for them to limit them and all kinds of things like that in a one-state solution, right? So just recognize it believes you don't get to fear, you're putting yourself in a more difficult position than you would like to. Yeah.
Question? Can I say that they're just going to be more by percentage, therefore if it's a democracy, they're going to get their rights?
You can, by the way, not necessarily accepted that that's the case, but for instance, about the right of return, right, which does get responded to from the opening opposition. Opening opposition could also have said, we don't think that any one-state solution that's going to happen is going to allow for the right of return. Here's why we think that's incredibly unlikely, and therefore that's not what we're talking about. And here's why Israel has the upper hand in negotiations, and therefore whatever happens, they get to dictate a lot of the rules about it, right? You don't get to fiat these things, so pay attention to that as a team. Secondly, okay, so Rachel, I think you do a lot. You give me just like a checklist of things that these people get, as opposed to actually analyzing to me why it is that right now or tomorrow in a two-state solution, I still won't have access to clean water and electricity. Why I still won't be able to get jobs, blah, blah. You're leaving a lot of room for closed government to eventually just do that and explain why that's not true. Whereas Havis is starting that to be the case, and so I believe that right now I'm going to get more jobs, but like why is this the only way or the better way or things along those lines? You're lacking a lot of analysis in that situation. Okay, so Nadav, I think that your explanation about why it is that their ability to achieve political capital is much less than they would likely to believe is well explained, it's well analyzed, you lay a good foundation for that. I believe you that they're going to get less of those things. What is my problem that happens here, right? Two things. One is that what comes of that in terms of what therefore they do not get. So you tell me it means they get less resources put into like sewage and electricity in tomorrow. But all of that isn't comparative to what I might get under a two-state solution, and I needed a better explanation as to why. And then when you tell me that these people care about their right to self-determination and autonomy, blah, I needed to weigh between those things. And I don't think you do that as clearly as you could have. And in that situation, while I believe that you've minimized the things that they've done, I still don't know why they're not better than they might otherwise be, and at that point it's harder for me to believe that they're...
Just to be sure,
yes.
So the first thing is a comparison to how many rights they will get in the two-state solution, and the second one is weighing between their need, like their aspiration for self-evidence.
Correct. To be clear, you do try and say something about like why does the Palestinian government can become that. I think that just the explanation that just says no, they will be a middle class equals democracy. There's a lot of things that need to happen there, and that's why I couldn't. If you had built that point and won it, then the weighing would have been better. But I just don't think they need to. Okay, so yeah, I think you do a decent job of attempting to, again, like minimize that minimization in terms of saying they'll self-segregate to some extent, there'll be some kind of autonomy, it won't be the end of the world, blah, 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 blah. I don't think you do a good enough job of responding to the notion that just says they're going to be discriminated, they're not going to have access, the same access to education, the same access to the autonomous world, the utopian world that you're building doesn't exist. You just said, well, they're a powerful voting bloc, so they need to be stuck. Literally all of the Nadav's analysis was how it doesn't matter if they're a powerful voting bloc, still there's a lot of structural reasons why they're not going to be able to access all the things that they want, and you don't respond to that at all, or weigh against that, or things like that, and that is a shame because it makes your win less clear than it otherwise would be. Similarly, when you tell me that in the long term they're going to integrate, then you just do that by example. They did it in the US with the Irish and the African Americans. One second we talk about Euros and using African Americans as an example of good integration, but that's not analysis. How does it happen? Why does it happen? Why does it happen? Is there a threat? Blah, blah, blah. Right? Like I need all of those things. I think your explanation on the democracy and why they don't get it was well done. I think you gave me a lot of decent analysis there. I think then you need a clearer bottom line and a clearer way, because when you choose to weigh it against the naive, the full 100% autonomy and democracy that they're going to have tomorrow in Israel, no. Weigh it against the realistic picture that they've built you of even a less democratic Israel, still better than what they're going to get, then it's an easier way for you win, and that to be clear. Okay, so. Great. No, I think you do definitely an excellent job of sort of trying to weigh up why the symbolism and that is more important to me and my right to autonomy is more important to me. I think the problem that I think that exists here is that you do it a lot by example and not enough by analysis, because a lot of it is sort of like, look, they don't vote today, so clearly this is what's important to them, or like some people in a POI later, some people are willing to kill themselves for this, clearly it's very important to them, and I believe that. But the problem, the second you don't do it by analysis, what makes it difficult for me is to necessarily know to what extent this is true and why. So if you lay the foundation of why people prefer and then analyze why to a lot of people and likely to the Palestinian people this is more important than somewhat better access to jobs, then I can believe that it's true of the larger population as opposed to just some of the examples that you're giving me that do that. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Great. And then again, like I think that given the minimization that they've given to the autonomy under Yair's point, I would have wanted you to, if you engaged that more directly, I think it would have been easier for me to still say, okay, but the less autonomy here is at least the less autonomy under my own like banner as opposed to this. Like if you'd engaged it more directly, it would have been easier for me to potentially weigh you above them. But then, okay, cool. So, come on. Yeah. Cool. So all of the things about things being off clash is true. Okay. I think, yeah, but basically most of my stuff really is to you. You do a clear, I think like when you're rebutting them directly, it's very clear what you're adding on top of the government. Otherwise, a lot of the like 10 reasons that you give me are reasons they've already given me. Now you analyze them better and do that. But so say, here's what they said, here's where my analysis is what's necessary to actually win this point, here's why we're doing it, blah, blah, build it. If you're going deeper, differentiate it, explain why the ways that you're making my life very difficult and I don't enjoy it. So don't do that thing and don't be off clash. What? Okay. So.
You did all much before.
Sure. I think that the whole point about why it's more likely to devolve again into war could have been interesting, and you say in like one sentence was actually building it as a point in your speech, which is a shame because that was like something they really didn't talk about at all and could have been an easier way for me to see if you've added things to the big. That whole question. Okay. Okay. So I think that you do. Okay, 1 second. I'm just trying to really. Okay. Yeah. So obviously, like a lot of things I said about why a lot of your stuff is very similar to what they did and things along those lines. You have some things that you add, but then they're very underanalyzed. So for instance, when you tell me you added an additional impact of what they said, and you say it's not just they don't want to integrate and they don't feel a part. When you have a population that doesn't want to integrate, you get a non-functional state. Now that's interesting. That's not what they told me. What does that look like? What does that mean? Why does that make everyone's lives worse? What does that devolve to? I don't know, right? You end it at just like that statement, which is new and interesting. If you would have analyzed that and taken that impact much further, that's something that I can credit you for and give you additional things in the debate if you do those things. Similarly, when you just tell me that like the second I don't have a bogeyman equals democracy, there's a lot of logical leaps that happen that literally you've already gotten preempted from it that very clearly tells you here are all the structural reasons, or some of the structural reasons, that it's not just about the bogeyman that's stopping people from being able to get to democracy, and you don't engage with that, and you don't answer those things, and then it makes it difficult for me to deal with your point. So I like that you didn't spend too much time talking about your off-clash extension. That did please me. I did enjoy that. However, still some off-clash extension, so that's a thing. But also, I think that you also spend a lot of time, if it's in like little pieces of rebuttal and if it's in blah, 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 the only weighing that you attempt to give me versus opening is your off-clash extension, which I can't give you as weighing against them. So
No, tell me what the analysis about it is, why it's better than theirs, why it is that it beats them. All those things are things that you don't do. Or, if you want to take your offensive system and make it unclash, do what we eventually ended up doing for you, what we could take from the viability point, and focus on those parts, talk about not just like whether it will exist, but any of those things. Those are both options that you had, and the way that you structured your speech made it you talked about your extension for only 2 minutes, but you didn't weigh anything else up and explain to why any of the rebuttals that you were giving were particularly important, and then it was just like, here's things that I said in this debate, this is not what a web speech looks like. And that made it shame. I do think that you have good additional rebuttals, like why you have a higher likelihood to go to war, which you expand on, and it helps you win the debate, why it is that I do actually have an incentive to vote tomorrow, why it's likely to be a political power, things along those lines, which are good and helpful rebuttals that help to engage with the other side, but like, make them into a thing that looks like a whip speech. Okay. Great. So, who's this? Okay, so Shakir. Again, a lot of the stuff that I have for you is very similar, and in particular, notice, you choose, here's the weighing that you give me over OO. It says, they said integration, we said it might devolve into violence. 1, did you? I don't think that ever happened. But 2, if that is what you said, and that's where you're weighing, then where's all of the analysis on that? What did you say about it devolving into violence? Why is that more important than the things that they've already given me? Why is it, all of that, right? If that's what you're choosing to be the thing that weighs you above opening opposition, it has to exist in a very clear way in your speech, and it has to be like analyzed, it has to be something that you take as being important, things along those lines. So that becomes very difficult to deal with. Similarly, just a lot of lacking in rebuttals to a lot of the stuff that we're getting from closing government about why it's much more difficult for them to interfere tomorrow, why it's much less likely to evolve into a war, why even a discriminatory Israel is better than the opportunities I'm going to get under my own state. Like all of those things, you're not really engaging with a lot of the cases that they brought up, and that's a shame because I could credit you for rebuttals and put you somewhere else in this debate, but I don't think that you fully engaged with your team. And that is true. Okay? Cool. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. Yeah.